pull up the presentation.
Absolutely.
So over to.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and privilege for me to host this evening's talk on behalf of HR Milestones. HR Milestones is a decade-old, what do you say, a not-for-profit organization of like-minded HR and learning professionals whose objective is to set about a culture of learning. So the entire series that's happening now called Dil Se is all about learning from the heart. And I am one of the newest entrants into this group. I'm just a week old here, but it already feels like family for me, and everyone, I seem to have got connected very well with everyone. And of course, I must thank Annapurna once again for bringing me in here. So today's speaker actually is a very, very well-known face, already a TEDx speaker, whom I happened to meet a few months ago, I think somewhere in November 2019. We met for the first time and we shared the stage on a panel discussion in a campus in Delhi. And it was an instant connection. We realized that there is something which will keep our paths keep crossing. And since then, we have been connected, I think, very, very regularly. So we follow each other on social media, and we ensure that we keep boosting each other's morale also. So to tell a little about Vikas Dua, he's an amazing person, extremely down to earth. And I've known that he's worked in a spectrum of organizations, starting from what was a startup in the days when startups were not so common, right up to large complex organizations, and that's his span of expertise. I've also known him as somebody who is an expert in the area of talent acquisition, and so when he chose this topic for today, I think there couldn't have been a better topic. Apart from all of those, he is right now playing the role of a chief mentor with an organization called Align, and the space where they work in is amazing. It's about how you is in the space of academics and how you make learning so much interesting, actually by democratization of academics. It's a very interesting space that he's in. And how he is absolutely apt for this forum of Dil Se is because he writes wonderful poetry in English. I write in Hindi, being a South Indian, and he writes in English. He writes his poetry in a series called as HR from the Heart. And that's how he is an absolutely apt speaker for today's forum. So over to you, Vikas, and let's hear it from you, Dil Se.
Great. Thank you, Harini. And I think you've been very kind. I hope I can live up to whatever you've shared. Thanks a lot to the HR Milestones Forum, to Harishji and to you in particular for enabling this. On a Friday evening, all of you have taken the time out to join in. I think commendable. My hat's off to you. Hope I'm able to deliver value which you can carry forward in your work as we go along. I'll just share my screen, and there's a slide pack I have which I'll refer to. It will give you a perspective of what I want to share today. Now, when Harishji called me about a week ago and discussed this opportunity, I was in a flux because suddenly he said, you'll be put in front of about 100 HR folks. And it's almost unnerving, right? I mean, each one of us on this call is an expert and knows possibly much more about recruitment than I do, but I give it some thought. I actually used 24 hours to think through carefully, and I decided to share this, which is the topic that I'm really going to be talking about, recruitment redefined. Why this topic? As Harini explained, I've been in large organizations, and what she didn't mention, however, was that these organizations somehow happen to be in the BPO space, the ITS space, which has been extremely fast growing and very dynamic. Last 15 years, I've really actually learned all my HR in this space. And we call this space a leaking bucket because the kind of staff turnover that we experience, the kind of attrition that we experience is unparalleled. So talent acquisition teams, have to be continuously on the treadmill, continuously recruiting day after day. It's an always on mode. It's almost like there is a backup generator, and if anything fails, the backup generator picks up. There's no stopping at all. So that's why I thought I'd bring in some learnings from this space. The advantage that this space gives you is that there is a lot of technology that you need to deploy in this space, because when you're managing that kind of scale and scope, you cannot survive without technology. So BPO companies by design and BPO recruitment teams by design have had the good fortune of working very closely with some of the best recruitment tools available in the market. I personally have worked with a lot of the recruitment automation organizations very closely. In fact, we've collaborated on some of their own first pilots as they launched their product in the market, and one has guided them in also trying to fine tune that product. So I thought this would be extremely appropriate for me to talk about. It's something that obviously I'm comfortable with, and I think when you have a post-COVID kind of scenario playing out, you will obviously realize that as we move forward, technology will play a bigger role. And I think recruitment leaders, HR folks should be very conversant with the same, should be able to be aware of firstly what is the technology available for them in the marketplace, and be able to deploy that effectively. So that's why really this topic of recruitment redefined. However, before we go there and get you up to speed with how this technology has come to be, I thought it's best to share some kind of history as well. After all, if we don't learn from the past, I don't think we are better prepared for the future. If you recall the scene, some of you may do, and if you appreciate it or recognize it, use one of those smileys that Harini spoke about, or those claps, and let me know that you have. This is a scene from a classic movie of 1975 called Diwar, and this is the job interview scene. In this scene, the actor Shashi Kapoor is actually threatening the hiring manager with a gun in order to get selected for the job. That was the scenario in those years, the 1970s, 80s. I'm sure some of you would be aware it was the era of the license Raj. You had more candidates, less jobs. And it was the entire nexus of the politicians, the bureaucracy, and the businessmen, which was at its peak. In that environment, getting a job literally required someone to flash a gun. Moving forward to the year 2001, another scene from another movie that some of you may recall. A very iconic movie. Most of us would have seen it, heard about it, Three Idiots. In this scene, what is happening? The student, played by the actor Sharmun Joshi, is at campus. A lot of companies visit the campus for campus placements, and here this student is sitting across the table from one such panel member and actually saying that he will join or qualify for the interview on his own merit and with his own particular mindset. He will not get aligned to an organization or will not fall into the so-called standardization trap. That's what happened towards 2001. Moving closer to last year, 2019, some of you may even recall this amazing scene. Another movie which won a lot of awards, Gully Boy. You have the actor Ranveer Singh here playing the main character Murad. He was in a college, I'm sure some of you would be recalling, but there were no campus placements. Murad is very clear, he wants to make it as a hip hop star. He finds his own guru out there in the market. He goes up to him, manages to connect with him, becomes his apprentice, learns the trade from him, and then goes on to build a success story. That's about is nothing but a Murad. And forward, what is it going to be like? I call this team the Geo generation, not the Gen Z that the international world calls. They've been transformed by what is, the Geo. Today, you can have being able to be a asset city. What happens in 2020 and beyond, especially now that we have suddenly the COVID scenario playing out. Companies have been turned topsy-turvy. Candidates have also now got a huge shock. And what is clear is that going forward, you will need to have a recruitment process
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your audio is stuck up.
Recruitment engine.
Because
Can you hear me?
yeah, your network was very choppy, so we lost you in between. So can you just repeat what you said about 2020? Because you're on mute. You're on mute. Yes.
Yeah, is it better now?
Yes.
Where did you lose me?
You
in some of this?
started with 2020.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I believe someone commented as well that we dropped out somewhere around Gully Boy. So really, what happens in 2020 and beyond now, especially now, suddenly we have a world-changing event, life-changing event of the COVID-19 scenario, and you have social distancing, remote working at the top of everyone's mind. So companies will have to re-engineer their recruitment processes, their hiring engines or processes that they've been using for years and years. No longer will companies be preferring to get lots of candidates into their office spaces, keep them waiting for hours on end, and processing them while someone up the recruitment hierarchy decides that that person is selected or not. Similarly, candidates will need to be in a point where they will not want to travel too much, obviously because of the risk of the virus spreading through using public transport or being at the workplace, which may be a slightly crowded for extended periods of time. So it becomes even more challenging for organizations to realign their recruitment engines to support this new normal as we've been discussing every day. So what are some of the things that companies can do? If you look at the entire recruitment value chain, these are the steps that you would all be aware of as well, I'm sure. You start with creating your employer brand. You become a desired organization that people want to and aspire to join. Then you start sourcing the candidates, rolling out the JDs, attracting them, getting the applications in. You put them through a series of assessments in the screening and assessment stage, and you interviews where a number of people meet them in succession and decide whether someone is good enough to be selected or not. And finally, you onboard them and welcome them with garlands and other things into the organization. The beauty is that now finally you have tools and technology available for talent acquisition that helps throughout this entire value chain. The finance guys got their ammunition many years ago. The sales guys got it with Salesforce. The HR teams also to some extent got the HRIS, and they managed to do a good job. The talent acquisition team somewhere got left behind. But really, thanks to cloud and thanks to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all these technologies that have really zoomed up in the last 2 to 3 years, this space is really hot today. And if someone is actually going to look at which platform to deploy, you really have a choice, much like you have when you go to a food court and you have 10 different vendors available to you. So there is a choice or the advantage of plenty today, and that's what you can look at. I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into what can you do in each one of these stages and what really the problem that is being solved is. When you look at the employer brand, in the 1990s, we really started seeing, and you recall
Sir?
the C earlier. Sorry.
Purvi, you're on mute. Purvi saying something.
Yes. Sir, Purvi here.
Yeah, Purvi.
Sir, you had aware about the talent acquisition tools. Sir,
Yeah.
which type of tools are available for talent acquisition nowadays?
Yes, that's what I said.
Can you suggest?
You're on mute again, Purvi, but
Sir,
you want
can you
some recommendations?
suggest? Can you suggest any tool for that?
Let's go through the presentation. I'll take the Q&A at the end if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sir.
I would
Sure, sir.
definitely have some
Thank.
guidance around that, but I think it'll be fair if because some
Sure,
of the
sir.
answers may get covered during the presentation itself.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Great. So coming back to the employer brand angle, traditionally what we've all been used to is the space where someone in the corner office, the CEO, the founders, even the marketing heads have gotten together and tried to create the external face of the organization. This was similar to the brand face being made available to their customers or clients. And they really didn't differentiate much between what their employer brand would be. The brand which enables talent acquisition to go and capture or attract the right talent into the organization. Thankfully, in the 1990s, when we had the post-liberalization era, and a lot of organizations had to compete for the high-quality talent at the campuses, the concept of employer brand became more popular. And now suddenly HR heads and recruitment heads started getting involved in the discussion. In the last few years, in fact, the bigger thing that's happening today is that it's no longer just the HR folks or the TA folks who are going to drive the employer brand. It's really each and every employer. Some of you may be aware of this case which happened with one of the leading mobile service providers in India, where one of the customers logged on to Twitter regarding an issue she was facing. And when the customer service person from that brand responded online, she said, "I don't want to talk to you because you're from X community. Get someone else." What the provider actually did was they actually provided another agent, customer service agent, who was from the so-called preferred identity that the customer wanted. Now, interaction like this, just imagine, happening outside in the online world, suddenly became into a whole marketing issue for the organization, for the mobile service provider. So someone anywhere in any corner of the world could be a customer, could be the customer service agent. In this case was a third party that was supporting this mobile operator. It was not even a badged employee of the organization. And suddenly that third party employee could actually impact or strengthen or reduce the quality of employer brand. That's what's happened. And with the social media being available today, literally everyone is able to contribute to that. So what HR folks are doing is using platforms, both internal as well as external networks that you're very familiar with, like Facebook, like Twitter, LinkedIn, to showcase their brand through the entire employee base that they have. So when you have, let's say, a Rangoli competition today as an HR team, it's not only just within that shop floor. What you're really telling all your employees is, go hashtag it with "my company makes the best Rangoli" and tweet it out into cyberspace. That's what's happening thanks to these platforms. Everyone, it becomes the brand, and you become a 24/7 operating agency, brand agency on your own, in fact, irrespective of whichever industry you're from. The gains obviously is that now it's a very transparent face that you have to the world, to the applicant base. Sharing an example from my industry, if you look at Google, preferred employer for a lot of freshers starting out in the world, primarily because they happen to offer free meals in their cafeteria, which are of a 5-star level quality. That itself has such a strong buzz in the campus space and in the student base that if you ask a student as to top 3 reasons why you would want to work for a Google, apart from creativity and all, this will also feature. That's been the result of surveys we've done over the years. And this also impacts your overall employee well-being and the candidate survival in the organization, because when they come in with a positive view about your brand, they actually tend to stay longer as well. Moving on to the next element, the sourcing piece. Sharing in continuation with what I was told you earlier about being part of the BPO industry, where at a scale level, one has hired close to 25,000 people in an annual year. What ends up happening is that you need to continuously enhance your sourcing engine's reach. You need to expand the talent pool that you can reach out to. Sitting in Delhi, if that's where your office is, you cannot survive by just recruiting from Delhi. You need to recruit from tier 2 towns around Delhi. You need to, in fact, recruit from the entire north zone. So what this requires you to do, and what has traditionally been done, is that companies have set up what we call campus teams, or they've set up outlocation recruitment agencies or partners. And what they've done is that they've gone to those towns and cities all across, selected candidates and encouraged them, motivated them to go relocate to the metropolis town. So that's how the business and the industry or the BPO recruitment teams have actually survived, by expanding the whole scale and scope. But again, you'll appreciate that doing that is a very costly exercise. Having additional headcount that will need to be deployed, sent across, and then you have the safety to worry about. We've had instances in our teams where goons have troubled the recruiters, or they've missed their trains in the night and had to stay at the platform overnight. And those are scary issues for any HR leader. So to counter that, technology has again played a huge role. Today, really, at the click of a button, you can release your JD out into the whole world, whether it is your online job portals, or to the entire recruitment vendors that have a tie-up with you, or directly to candidates who are in your own database. It is extremely simple, and all it needs is a web page linked to your own ATS, your recruitment system that you've deployed in the organization. One of the big challenges in the past as far as sourcing goes was also the whole issue of vendor and talent acquisition nexus. When you have limited knowledge, or you have knowledge being shared in pockets, there is always a risk that some people will misutilize it. So we've had cases where recruitment leaders have actually shared the requirement only with one or two preferred vendors, leaving out the rest of them, because there were obviously some transactions or benefits being given to those recruitment leaders. When you deploy a system like this, the biggest advantage really is that there is complete transparency. Every vendor in your impaneled list, or every employee in your organization can refer a candidate. And the first one to do so, get a selection, is ultimately the one who gains the vendor payout or the employee referral bonus, whatever you offer in the organization. Apart from that, obviously, the big advantage of such platforms is that you also end up tapping what we call in the industry as passive candidates. Candidates who are not actively looking out, who are contented in their job, possibly doing extremely well. But these are the same candidates you really want. You want to shake someone from the comfort zone who has a great potential and can join in your organization and take you to the next level, right? The next element that we spoke about earlier is the screening and assessments pillar. And here, technology has played a tremendous role, possibly the most impactful role out of all. Given the fact that thanks to machine learning and AI, a lot of the manual work that this stage involves is done much more efficiently and much more effectively. So if you recall a typical screening or assessment process, you would align candidates, you would probably give them out paper or pencil test. At best, you will give them your one or two office machines or desktops that you have set up for them to take their assessments. And if they are at the vendor side, the vendor will log them into the system and they will take that assessment, and you will get an idea of how they have performed. Thanks to cloud-based technology, and again, the strong backbone that these platforms have, you can literally have zillions of combination of assessments. So just like a CAT exam or a GMAT, every candidate who comes in front of the machine gets a separate assessment, which is not repeated or not a duplication of the candidate sitting next to him. The clear advantage of something like this is that you have a very, you can say, fair selection process. You have only the right people getting selected. It also prevents what we have observed in the industry as impersonation. We've actually had and observed this, and I kid you not, that we've had a Mithun being selected in a remote interview scenario on telephone in the good old days. And when the joining time has happened, we've had a Maithili come in and be sitting there with all the required assessment sheets and papers, because someone in the system, whether it was a recruiter on the ground there or the vendor, played the system. The technology that we have today is so strong that thanks to the web camera, which is also being utilized right now for you to see me, can actually do real-time auditing of the candidate who's sitting across the laptop or the machine and giving the interview. These are also obviously available on mobile phones and tablets, so the system and the platforms work across. The biggest advantage in such a scenario really is that you have the systems being operational 24/7. So a candidate who's sitting in Baroda can possibly get free from his college studies at about 4 or 5 p.m., take the test at about 6:30 after he's refreshed himself, and the next day the HR team or recruitment team sitting in the organization can evaluate that at his or her convenience once she comes into office. Similarly, someone who's working in the night shift can come in the morning, take the assessment, and it's available next day for the recruiter to assess and see if the candidate should be taken forward to the next selection rounds or not. Beautifully constructed. These assessments and platforms also allow for not only the typical analytical or technical tests that we have all been accustomed to, but the new age algorithms and tools, technologies that have deployed can also assess voice quality, can also assess cognitive and non-cognitive skills. So pretty much for any role, any position, you would have some test or the other that's available to you. Again, in the good old days, we used to have a lot of subjectivity in assessments. In the BPO space, where voice vocal skills are very important, soft skills, we would always have a differentiation between one recruiter's understanding of a candidate's spoken skills versus another candidate's assessment of the same candidate. Thankfully, due to technology and these standardized tools, you get a very fair, stable selection test. So that's the advantage that technology has added to the screening and assessments piece. Moving to another stage in the selection process, the interview and offer stage. As a HR or a recruitment person, I think if I'll be very right if I say that your biggest pain point must be coordinating of these interviews. First, calling the candidate, checking his or her ability, then checking with the panel, who may be a senior director or anyone else in the organization, checking for his or her availability, then trying to map the two by sending calendar invites, by talking to them. And then suddenly you have the interviewer who's got an urgent meeting set up by the CEO and needs to move for that. So you've got to reschedule that interview. Again, starting the whole loop in back and forth. From the candidate's perspective also, and a hugely challenging angle, you have the same questions being asked during the various interview rounds. So you have the HR interviewer who will call the candidate, ask the same basic questions. Why are you looking for a change? Tell me something about you. Why would you want to join our organization? Tell me some of your biggest achievements. And then once the HR recruiter has cleared the candidate, he'll or she will find himself in front of the HR manager perhaps, who will ask the same questions again, in a little bit variation maybe. If he or she clears that, the candidate will find herself or himself again in front of the operations or the hiring manager's interview and answer the same story all over again. This is possibly an area where organizations and talent acquisition teams particularly lose a lot of their bandwidth and quality time available to them. The platforms that we have today enable what are known as asynchronous and synchronous interviews both. I'll just explain that in a minute. So asynchronous interviews are something where you have a pre-recorded set of 2 or 3 questions which are coded into the recruitment platform. When the candidate applies to that and actually sits down for the interview in front of a laptop or a desktop, he or she goes through those questions and records his interview answers right there and then itself, while the web camera of the machine is recording the interview. In the back end, the software is able to analyze voice modulation, tonality of the candidate, the fact that whether the candidate is looking to the left or right, taking help from any other resources, and do that real-time audit as far as interviews goes. So there is a security element built into the software as well. The next stage is obviously that the interview or the recorded interview lands into the box of an HR recruiter or a HR reviewer in this case, who actually goes to the interview and basis that quick 2 to 3 minute interview can actually decide whether they want to take that candidate forward or reject that candidate altogether. So now just visualize this. The candidate gave this asynchronous interview, maybe again going back to the previous example at 7 p.m. in the evening, but the HR interviewer is doing it at his convenience at 10 a.m. in the morning the next day. So the time or the distance between both of them is actually just nullified thanks to this platform. If the HR interviewer finds the candidate good enough, he can now use the same platform to actually schedule what is called a synchronous interview, which is where an interviewer, much like what we are doing currently, sit right across each other in a live interaction and do the interview. In this scenario, obviously, you can add in a panel, which means you can have 3 or 4 people from the organization who may be, in fact, in different locations, who may be in different zones, and they can actually jointly interview this candidate real time. So in one interview, you could do what you would have previously achieved in 3 or 4 interviews. And the added advantage is that you also have in the same system a mark sheet, so to speak, where you can code in prior to the interview, of course, all the parameters that are important for you. If it is, for example, candidate's personality, analytical ability, ability to handle pressure, the typical things that we evaluate when we are doing a personal interview. You can code all that. Each of the interviewers can score that candidate on a scale right there and there itself. The system will auto-calculate the scores. And at the end of the interview, they'll get a flash saying whether the candidate has met the benchmark score or not. That compresses and simplifies an entire lot of activities, which in at least the current scenario in a lot of organizations even today is done in a manual way and is done in a very transactional way. Again, once the candidate is selected or not selected, the panel is right away there connected on the platform. They can debate, discuss, close out the discussion, post the interview quickly, and the system itself can then move forward to the offer stage of releasing the candidate's offer or a letter of intent, as we do in a lot of organizations. The last element of the cycle that we've been discussing so far is again onboarding and joining, a very critical step. And in the BPO space, all of us have really struggled with what we call offer drops, where depending on which side of the BPO business you're at, it's anywhere between 15% to 30%, which means that if I've selected, let's say, 10 customer service agents for voice process for my organization, chances are that about maybe 7 or 8 will join if I'm lucky. And that to me, or that to the business, is a big problem, because if you don't have the required numbers, there's a direct revenue impact later down. You don't have the required people in training, which means that you don't have the required people who will go down to the shop floor and start delivering. So what organizations have been doing in the past is, again, when they have released offers, if they've tried to keep connected to the candidates by calling them up. What we use or say more colloquially in the HR world is keep the candidate warm. In a high scale, high hiring environment, it becomes challenging, because how many candidates are you really going to call? And then you have the issues of the time mismatch. The employee may be working currently in an organization where his phone is not available in real time. There may be the issue of mobile networks. We're all very familiar with it, the way networks fall and give up on us in the most crucial times. So this is a problem that has been existing for a lot of years. In the case of senior level onboarding, there has been an issue of making sure the senior leaders are available for the new hire to meet when he or she joins the organization, to welcome them, to give them an overview of their own function. Again, done with that same mechanism of picking up the phone, calling up the marketing head, calling up the IT head and saying, "Are you available, sir? I'd like you to meet up with this new vice president who's joining the organization. Extremely tedious, and to some extent not value adding for the recruitment or the HR person. If I'm sure you'll agree with me. What has happened also, therefore, is that the industry has, or all organizations have tried to somewhere use a very standardized, structured approach in onboarding, which is a good thing in a way that every employee gets the same experience. But today, coming back to the Gen Z that we spoke about a little earlier in the presentation, everyone expects a very personalized approach. Each one is a different one, as they say. And therefore, unless you deploy a technology platform which allows you to do that, you pretty much won't be able to do that. Thankfully, nowadays, the platforms that we have available do a lot of this and much more. For starters, immediately after the offer letter is being shot off to the candidate, and she has, let's say, accepted the offer, the onboarding process starts, where auto mails, auto calls from the system itself go across to the candidate, and whatever documentation is required, the candidate herself needs to go online and upload them into the system. This again cuts off a very non-value adding activity for organizations, where you would have to actually deploy resources to sit and scan documents, photocopy them, or upload them in the system, verify them. Today, technology can support you seamlessly in this aspect. It's like when you go to some of the new age department stores, like Decathlon, for example, that we have a very big store of here in Noida and Gurgaon. You have machines there which allow you to check out your purchases on your own. So you don't have a customer service or a check or a agent standing there, telling machine agent standing there who's going to bill you. You scan your item yourself, you swipe your credit card, and you walk out with it. That is really the future. And if you ask me from a talent acquisition standpoint, this is where the future is. But the candidate is, self-serving himself or herself by completing all the data entry respect to his or her joining, uploading the documents, and getting ready to join. The system also helps to keep the candidate warm by pushing high quality information, which is being prepared by the marketing team or by the HR team. Gives the candidate good insight into what the organization is all about, what he or she is likely to experience once she joins in, what are the policies of the organization. So the candidate comes in much more settled, because I'm sure you'll agree with me, an onboarding is an environment where there is a lot of trepidation that the candidate has. There's hesitation. Have I made the right call? Will I be successful in this organization? Will I fit in? And by doing all of this, you help the candidate to calm those nerves to a large extent, and bring them into the organization with, like they say, very welcoming arms. There is a higher customer satisfaction or a new employee onboarding satisfaction that is seen thanks to such tools being deployed. This is something that a number of studies have shown us in the past. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the offer drop also significantly falls down if you have a very well automated and organized onboarding program. So what would be my suggested approach really for those of you on the call? And I know there was one question earlier on also in terms of what are the tech platforms to deploy. So clearly the way forward is something which is tech enabled. Nowhere am I saying is that the human element of recruitment or the human being that we have as a recruiter needs to go away or should not exist. The fact is we need to use technology to strengthen our processes and to expand our reach and to make the system more robust and strong. You will have in the future, very soon, in fact, I'm confident, just like you have an HR business partner role, you will have what we will call a talent acquisition business partner role. So the recruiter will not be actually sitting and picking up the phone or checking question papers or calling up candidates and lining them up for interviews. The recruiter will be talking to the business heads, talking to the hiring managers, trying to understand what is it that you really need, what kind of candidate, what should that candidate be capable of doing, what should be the hard skills, what should be the soft skills, what technologies should that candidate be comfortable using, what kind of social graces should that candidate have. Understanding the entire nuts and bolts of that profile of the candidate that the hiring manager wants, and then that recruiter should deploy all the technology that we've spoken about to source that candidate. Also, once the candidate has been sourced, the talent acquisition business partner or the recruiter should actually be maintaining that one-on-one relationship or equation with the candidate, really becoming that mentor or support or buddy for that candidate to join the organization seamlessly and without any tension of any sort. So that's what the larger aim of the approach is, as per my suggestion. That really brings me to the end of what I wanted to share with you today, basis my learning in the BPO space and in the basically the technology frameworks that I've had the good fortune of working closely with. I'm more than happy to answer some of your questions. I hope that some of this has given you fresh insight or something worth thinking about. But the stage is yours, Harini. I pass this on to you if you would like to add anything or.
Absolutely not. Today's your day, so I wouldn't hijack. But because I see some very interesting questions that have come, and I believe every single question deserves an equally fantastic answer here. So Rajaram has two questions. You can also see it on the chat box, but I'll quickly voice it for you.
Sure.
That everyone is a brand. What are the key skills one should have to establish oneself as a brand? I think this is a very pertinent question. So I would like you to take that first.
See, a brand really needs to stand for something, and that's the product space has clearly shown us that if you look at a brand like Volvo, and that's a car that I'm sure if you Google, the first thing that will come up on the screen is safety. And it's not that Volvo's managed to create a halo around that word and around itself by just pushing it out there in social and saying, I'm safe and safe. Across any tests or any studies that have been done over the years, and typically crash tests, Volvo always ranks somewhere right near the top because they actually substantiate that statement of theirs or their brand of theirs with content, which is that they solidify their brand with that safety element, whether that's through better quality material or more reinforced structures, or even better airbags. The way they deploy all of that premium quality of production into their final product and then sell it and then brand it makes them more believable and makes people attracted to it.
Yeah, well said. So actually I was just coming to that. If I have to summarize what you just answered for the benefit of others, I love a lot of these three-letter acronyms. So to me, building himself or herself as a brand is got to do with authenticity, which actually is a combination of three C's: commitment, courage, and conviction. So I think that's exactly the example you gave out of Volvo. It's all about being authentic, and that's how you build your brand. Another question from Rajaram, but again, this is a brilliant question, so I want it for the benefit of everyone. Millennials are generally found to be impatient and want instant gratification. How would employer branding help for retaining them by creating a growth ladder?
Sure. So when you look at your employer branding proposition for millennials specifically, I think, of course, there are very generalized statements that come across in terms of them being, impatient, demanding a lot of communication, and being very aspirational. But what you have to figure out for yourself as an organization is really which of those millennials do you want in the organization? Do you want the introvert, hardworking uh, nerd kind of millennials? Do you want the extrovert, always online, visible, needing a lot of interchange between the others? So once you zero down on which is that specific group or profile that you want, then you will need to take the next step in trying to chart out your employer brand, because you can't be everything for everyone. Unfortunately, that strategy doesn't work today. But
Absolutely.
what you can really do is be the world for someone unique, and that's what I think you should aim to do.
Absolutely. Be the world for someone. It's an amazing statement. Abhishek has a question which I'm not very clear. So Abhishek, can you just unmute yourself and voice your question? I didn't quite get it, so I should do justice to your question.
Sure.
So please ask.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, hi Abhishek.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, like, if an employee is working in an CSR department in an industry, then what is his value?
For a CSR department,
Yes.
see, tremendous value. I think going forward, and again, the way I see it, thanks to the current crisis that we're part of, the silver lining that's emerging is that a lot of people across the board, irrespective of where they stand in the social hierarchy, economic hierarchy, are realizing that the life and world extends just beyond themselves and their immediate near ones. So companies are also likely, and I'm hoping also that will be more CSR oriented, and the government is promoting a lot of efforts towards enhancing CSR initiatives by organizations. So
Yeah.
people who have excelled in this space, who have a track record of having worked in these domains, I think will be at a premium in a very short period of time, maybe 6 months to 9 months, because every company will want to increase their CSR bandwidth and footprint, and such professionals, maybe like you, so I'm assuming you're one of those, will stand to gain.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I got it.
So we have Sonali and Himani asking very similar questions. Can you share some of the tools or platforms where we can do asynchronous interviews? And also, can you cite some examples of asynchronous interviews or how they can be conducted? So it's all about the what and the how. You did explain a lot about the why, so also take us through the what and the how.
Exactly. Lovely, great. So the tricky question, Harni, I'm not sure if I should name some providers here. I'm happy to do that offline.
Yes.
Because I have interacted with, like I said, with a number of founders themselves, and I follow this area very closely. It's very something very passionate to me. But asynchronous interviews, a very clear, classic example that I can give you is, let's assume you're hiring for a position of a Java developer for your organization, and it's a person with maybe 1 year of work experience. Once you've created the JD in the system, the next stage would be really to create the assessments. And within the assessments, one stage is what is called the asynchronous interview setup stage. Here, what you'll do is you'll actually either type 2 or 3 questions, depending on what you want, one after the other, or you'll record it just like we are talking right now. So let's say your first question could be, tell me about yourself in about 2 minutes. The second question could be, why do you want to join our organization, in 2 minutes again. The third question could be, tell me a bit about Java and why do you think it's important in the world of IT. What will happen is that the same questions will actually pop up in the inbox through an automail of this candidate who's applying. Once he logs into that web to platform with whatever credentials, an ID, once he enters his entire application detail, the first question will come up on his screen. If it's a simple typed question, he'll see it like that and he'll read it. Or this video, like I'm talking to, will play up there, and you'll be asking that question, tell me about yourself. Once that pops up, he will be given a window there where he will have to, he will be told that switch on your webcam once you're ready. Click this record button and just record your answer. So once he does that, all he really needs to do is and that recording will remain on for 2 minutes. He'll say that, or he can stop it midway. He'll say that, hi, my name is Vikas Dua, and I'm applying for the post of Java coder for your organization. I belong to New Delhi, and I have graduated from Kirorimal College. Stop recording. This recording, and similar, he'll do the same thing for the next 2 questions which you had already encoded. The same 3 recordings will then come to you, just like we see WhatsApp videos nowadays which are forwarded. Once you see those videos in your platform, in the what we call the recruiter window, you can actually tick mark, select, or you can cross out reject. If you tick mark all 3, automatically the system will throw out a mail to this candidate saying, oh, congratulations, Vikas, you've been shortlisted. We look forward to having you for the next interview round, which will be a synchronous video round. And please key in your preferred date and time for the synchronous interview. So here you will get it a calendar mode. You will select the time and date that you want, the candidate will want the interview. It will come back to the recruiter, and recruiter can again either agree or propose an alternate time. So I hope, little tricky trying to explain this flow, but I hope I managed to convey some of that.
Yeah. So we have Shreya, Chandresh and Shruti with very similar questions. What's going to be the scene in the recruitment process and recruitment space in the post-COVID-19 era? And Shreya is also particularly interested to know, since signing documents are now not feasible because of remote working, etc., but manpower is needed on critical positions where there's a lot of confidential data. So how do you think this scene is going to look like post COVID-19?
Sure. So I think that's a combination of a couple of questions. I'll try and answer them, and I hope I've got them correctly. The first bit, I did touch upon it briefly when I said that, in the coming months and years, we are actually going to see recruitment teams trying to keep candidates a little away while the recruitment process is on. IT companies or BPO companies have been used to having, 15, 20, 30 candidates sitting in the reception area, waiting for the interviews to happen, going through the tests and all of that. A lot of companies have been used to going to campuses and sitting in the auditorium, addressing students, then taking them into GD rooms and processing them, and then doing the tests and so on. So there's been going to be a conscious effort, at least for the near term, until hopefully we have a vaccine, which is still some way off, where both company officials as well as even students, for their own safety, will want to kind of maintain this social distance. So what directly will happen, as for me, is that we will utilize technologies like this. To be honest, what is already happening in a lot of organizations, and I'm sure it must be in some of yours as well, that recruiters are using Skype and WhatsApp and other technology, even Zoom, for interviews real time. The disadvantage there really is that these are not auditable. There is nothing that is you can save as a file and retrieve it later. So there are no tests really which are automated. So the platforms allow you to actually do all of what we are really doing here in a much more customized and structured manner. So that will take care of that element. Regarding roles, regarding the online documentation piece, I'm sure with the number of changes that are happening, and the government more than all of us realizes that it's a very, very different world. I also foresee that there will be some regulations and some upgrading of laws which will allow online documentations and all of that to be formally legalized. So that is a question of, again, I would say a few months. I'm fairly confident. It is in many parts of the world completely acceptable. So I think it's only a question of time. The last was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, something to do with critical manpower being required in the office space itself.
Yes.
So that will continue. Again, organizations will obviously take measures to make sure the workspace is maybe less crowded, more sanitized, more safe for all employees working there. And those measures will be deployed by all of us, I'm sure, as a community. So if there are roles, and even today, for example, physical security, managing server room, in a restaurant, for example, you would need someone to be there to at least put the food on the counter, if not bring it to the table. So you can't wish away everyone, but there will be the roles being digitized where possible, and only critical manpower being required to be in office or in the workplace.
So Jiva has a question on how can startups, small startups, start creating their brand image. You having worked with startups,
Yeah.
can you throw some light on that as well?
So the startup community that way is extremely dynamic, and possibly a bigger expert on this than even I must be. But what I have seen and observed over the last couple of years is that the startups tend to kind of bounce in co-working spaces. They tend to bounce off each other's pluses, and again leverage social media and their alumni networks to start building themselves up in the community. And once they reach a sizable scale, then of course or they become a unique value proposition, then of course then the world picks it up, and then they either move into deploying their own agency, or if it's one of those unicorns, then the world becomes the agency.
So there's this very interesting point that Bhargavi has brought in as a question, but I think it fits kind of very well into the space that you're currently working in, Vikas.
Sure.
So she says, apart from document work and communication with HR, especially in pre-onboarding, is it cost effective to conduct small online workshops? And especially for campus hires, because she's asking if, prior to the induction process, would it be easier to keep campus to corporate transition a lot more engaging? I think this is an interesting piece, especially where you are working on. So she would love to have an answer.
So yeah, you're right, Harni, a very interesting question, and we are all actually figuring this out. My own personal perspective, there is that the high or the value transfer which you see in a face-to-face gathering where everyone is present together, which is possibly unbeatable at a lot of levels in a format like this when one is across. But the flip side is that you also have the advantage of being able to reach out to a lot more people or experts than you would traditionally have been able to. If you talk about campus engagement, particularly whether it's a guest lecture or it's a conclave, in the years gone by, you would really need to have calendar free for one of the or few of the experts that you're planning to bring in. And they would need to free up an entire day or two to travel to your campus to engage with the students and then go back to their respective organizations. Now today, due to the webinar format or this electronic communication, they literally need to spare 1 hour, and that suffices. The disadvantage, of course, is that can it be on the same level of engagement? Can it give that real-time interaction? Maybe not, but hopefully, as again these platforms develop further and technology strengthens, maybe we overcome some of these barriers. But in the near term, like I said again, everyone is going to prefer this because purely, I think safety is paramount for all, and it should be. I mean, why not?
Right. So there are a couple of more questions coming on, Vikas, but in the interest of time, I think we'll just conclude it now. But I just suggest, since everyone deserves an answer, I just suggest that you remain reachable.
Sure.
His contact information is very much there. You can reach him out through any of the social media, and he'll be able to answer. But I would just like to summarize a few points that really came out extremely well in this. One is that over a period of time, as the economy is changing, as there is dynamism, as there is so much of fluctuation, talent acquisition is one aspect of the human capital management, which has a direct link to the market and the economic fluctuation, and it has to and has been constantly evolving right through the current uncertain times. So I think that aspect came out extremely well, because in your presentation, as you took us through the history of how this function has developed. And a very important aspect which you brought is about how the talent acquisition team is responsible for building employer branding. And I loved Harsh's observation that if the HR processes are not commensurate with the brand that talent acquisition has built, then everything can rebound back on talent acquisition team, which is precisely why the HR later on, like I was saying, needs to play the role of the employer brand so that it is in sync with the brand that recruitment has built. And last but not the least, I think you gave a lot of insights on leveraging technology for candidate engagement, not just for the hiring process, the sourcing to hiring, but also for keeping the candidate warm or engaged, as we may call it. So I think with these 3 points, this has been a wonderful session with a good number of takeaways. And as I can see, there are questions coming in, and there are some really nice feedback also coming in. So I think this has been an extremely engaging session. Because you've really done a great job, fabulous. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for staying through the session. And it's been amazing being here once again. And thanks, Harishji, for having me here to anchor today.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikas. Thank you, Arni. Thank you, everyone who has joined today. Thank you. And keep joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.
There's still few sessions to go. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Harishji. Thank you, Arni. It was a great experience, and look forward to being in touch. Feel free to reach out. I'm sorry I could not answer all the questions, but I'm available on LinkedIn very easily. Just drop me a note, and happy to address that and connect. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.